Every afternoon, she would leave the warehouse with empty boxes in her arms. Everyone swore she was a thief, until a wealthy magnate decided to follow her in silence. What he discovered at the end of that road brought him to tears, collapsing right there on the street. "Stop her! That woman is taking something from the depot." Richard Benson's shout cut through the air of the loading dock like a whip. Mary Roberts froze 3 steps from the exit gate, a cardboard box clutched to her chest, her knuckles white from holding on so tightly. She didn't turn around immediately. She closed her eyes for an instant, took a deep breath, and only then turned her face towards the man approaching like a wounded bull, sweating, pointing at her with the thick finger of his right hand. Co-workers assembling orders in the aisles of South Point Distribution Center began to emerge one by one, drawn by the commotion. Some still held paint and tape in their hands, others left their scanners on the shelves. The end-of-day routine had been broken, and nothing entertains bored people more than public humiliation. "Miss Roberts, open that box right now," Richard ordered, planting himself in front of her, with his arms crossed over his belly. "The thefts in this depot are going to end today, and you are going to be an example for all those inside who think they're so clever." Mary didn't respond. She lowered her gaze to the dusty floor. She pressed her lips together until they were almost white. A small group of workers already formed a semicircle around them. Some subtly pulled out their cell phones. "Are you deaf, woman?" Richard repeated, a tone higher. "I told you to open that box. Either you open it right here, in front of everyone, or I call security and hand you over to the street officers in handcuffs. You choose." Mary's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from suppressed rage, from the weight of so many afternoons, enduring comments, twisted glances, whispers behind her back. But this time he had gone too far. This time there was a stage, an audience, cameras. She took a deep breath. She took a step towards a rusty metal bench by the gate. She placed the cardboard box down gently, as if it contained antique porcelain. She lifted the flaps one by one and stepped back, letting everyone see what was inside. Nothing. The box was completely empty. A murmur rippled through the circle of witnesses. Someone let out a nervous laugh. Another whistled derisively. Richard Benson leaned over the box, ran his hand along the bottom, as if expecting to find a secret compartment. He turned it over, shook it, held it up against the fading light of dusk. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. "And what does this mean?" he growled, raising his gaze to her, his brow furrowed. "What do you intend, Roberts? To make me look ridiculous in front of my employees? Do you think this is a game?" "I don't intend anything, Mr. Benson," she finally replied, her voice so calm it seemed to come from another reality. "You were the one who stopped me. You were the one who shouted. I am simply leaving work as I do every day. With a box. With an empty box," she corrected, "that the company was going to throw away at the end of the day. I've been doing it for a long time. With the permission of the previous supervisor, it was never a problem for anyone." "Well, with me, it is a problem," Richard spat, straightening up. He turned to the gathered workers. "Everyone listen up. From this moment on, it is forbidden for any employee to take cardboard, materials, bags, or anything else from this warehouse, even if it's trash. Do you understand me? Nothing is given away here. Nothing." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Some lowered their gaze, others nodded. No one dared to defend Mary. No one. What none of those present knew was that, standing about 30 yards from the gate, having just stepped out of an armored SUV, Franklin Vance had observed the entire scene in silence. He had arrived at the depot unannounced, as he always did when he wanted to know the truth of how one of his companies operated. Surprise inspections, no protocols, no reception committee, no photographers. The owner of Vance Logistics Group had a habit of entering through the employee's entrance, not the executive door. He used to say that a businessman who only knows his people through reports ends up managing ghosts. That afternoon, Franklin had arrived with the intention of walking the aisles, talking to 3 or 4 random operatives, and returning to his office before dark. He didn't expect to find that scene at the exit gate. He remained apart, his hands in the pockets of his formal suit, observing, listening, recording every detail in his memory. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with slicked back hair, and an expression that always seemed busy calculating something. His eyes, however, at that moment held a different intensity, because he couldn't tear them away from her, from the woman with the empty box, from the way she kept her shoulders straight despite the humiliation, from how her hands, though trembling, didn't let go of her dignity, from how she responded without shouting, without begging, without over-justifying herself. There was something about that woman that didn't fit the scene, something Franklin couldn't yet identify, but which stirred something inside his chest, a kind of distant echo, like when you hear a song you swear you don't know, but your body remembers it from somewhere. "Mr. Benson, may I leave now?" Mary asked, closing the flaps of the box and picking it up in her arms again. "My shift ended a while ago. I have commitments." "Commitments?" Richard laughed with that short, acidic laugh of someone enjoying petty power. "You have commitments? What kind, madam? Finding another depot to take cardboard from?" Some workers chuckled, others looked away uncomfortably. It was then that Mary did something no one expected. She raised her gaze, fixed it directly on Richard Benson's eyes, and spoke with a clarity that chilled the entire yard. "You can search me 1,000 times, sir. You can break every box that leaves my arms. You can ask my co-workers to record videos and circulate them throughout the neighborhood. You can do whatever you want with my name, but you will never find what you are looking for in my hands, because what I take from here doesn't fit in any box. And even if I wanted to show it to you, you wouldn't have eyes to see it." The silence that followed was dense, sticky, one of those silences that hung in the air for several seconds before anyone had the courage to break it. Richard opened his mouth to reply, closed it, opened it again, nothing came out. His face had reddened to his ears, and the folds of his neck vibrated with a rage he couldn't translate into words. "Lucy Parker," he then shouted, seeking refuge in the authority of someone higher up. "Get the HR manager down here immediately. This woman is to report first thing tomorrow for a disciplinary hearing. We'll see if she acts so pretty in front of the labor court." One of the co-workers ran towards the administrative building. Mary didn't move. She stood there with the box in her arms, waiting. It was as if she had already lived this exact scene 1,000 times in her head and had prepared for all possible variations. Lucy Parker arrived, walking briskly with an electronic tablet under her arm and a furrowed brow. She was a strict woman, with confident movements, who had built her career within the company based on rules and signatures. She wasn't easily impressed, but when she saw Richard huffing like a pressure cooker and Mary holding the box with that irritating stillness, something in her expression changed for just an instant. A shadow, a doubt. She knew Miss Roberts. She knew she never missed work, never got sick, never complained. "What's going on here, Mr. Benson?" she asked in a firm voice. Richard gave his account. He exaggerated the details. He added nuances that had never occurred. He spoke of systematic theft, disrespect, and a bad influence on other employees. Mary didn't interrupt him once. She only lowered her gaze to the box in her arms, as if silently speaking to someone inside. When Richard finished, Lucy asked to see the box. Mary handed it to her without resistance. The HR manager carefully examined it, tilted it, shook it, felt inside it empty. "Mr. Benson," Lucy said, returning the box to Mary, "there is no theft here. If you wish to formalize a complaint, you must do so in writing and with concrete evidence, not with suspicions. And, Miss Parker, I will remind you of something else," she continued, raising her tone slightly. "Company protocol prohibits public searches of employees. If there is a suspicion, the employee is called in privately with a representative from the administrative area present. What you have just done in front of all these co-workers will be included in my report, but not in hers, in yours." Some workers exchanged glances, others nodded discreetly. Richard was speechless. He hadn't expected that. "Miss Roberts, you may leave," Lucy indicated, turning to Mary with a professional gesture. "I regret this incident. We'll talk more calmly later." Mary barely nodded. She didn't smile, didn't thank her. She simply adjusted the box in her arms, smoothed her tied-back hair, and walked towards the gate without looking back at anyone. Her footsteps echoed firmly on the cement floor. As she passed the spot where Franklin still watched in silence, she didn't notice him. She didn't know that the owner of that entire company had just witnessed the complete scene. She didn't know that from that moment on, her life was about to take a turn she couldn't even imagine. Franklin followed her with his gaze until she exited through the gate. Then he remained motionless for a few more seconds, processing, until he turned to his driver, Arthur Smith, who waited discreetly a few yards away. "Arthur." "Yes, sir. I want to know where that woman goes. Every day. Every single day. I want to know today." The driver hesitated for an instant. He had seen Franklin Vance make many strange decisions over his years of service. But that glint in his eyes was new. It wasn't the glint of the businessman. It was the glint of a man who had just seen a ghost and didn't know it yet. Mary walked 3 blocks to the city bus stop, the box balanced in her arms. She boarded with it as if carrying something fragile. She sat in a seat at the back by the window. She rested her forehead against the glass and let the buildings pass blurred before her eyes. No one on that bus imagined what she carried inside her chest. The bus traveled through the commercial zone, crossed the bridge over the river, and entered humbler neighborhoods. The wide streets gave way to alleys, the pavement to cobblestone, the cobblestone to dirt. Mary got off at a roofless stop at the end of the line in a sector known as Pine Ridge Community, a neighborhood where people greeted each other by name and dogs slept in the middle of the streets. Behind her, more than 100 yards away, a dark, discreet car slowly advanced. Inside, Franklin Vance clenched his fists on his knees. He recognized the address, recognized the air, recognized the smell of burning wood, mixed with freshly baked bread, but he didn't want to admit it yet. Mary walked along a dirt path between unpainted brick homes and weathered wooden fences. Some children played with a deflated ball. An elderly woman swept the front of her house. Everyone greeted Mary by name. They smiled at her, offered her water. She greeted them back with a tenderness that seemed like a different person, completely unlike that silent woman from the warehouse. "Miss Mary, you're here," a small child shouted, running to hug her. She knelt, caressed his head, and placed the empty box in his hands, as if giving him a gift. The child laughed, his mouth open, revealing small, crooked teeth, and ran off down the path with the box on his head, shouting, "The boxes are here! The boxes are here!" Franklin pulled the car over to the side of the street. He got out. He walked the last few yards on foot, hiding behind a rusty utility pole. His heart was racing. Something deep inside told him he already knew this path, that his feet had trodden this same ground before, long before, when he still didn't know what money, betrayal, or forgetting were. He turned the corner and saw it. At the end of the path, surrounded by a patched wooden fence, stood a humble building. Block walls painted a faded color by the sun, a metal sheet roof with patches, a wide gate open, where women with bags and children running entered and exited. Above the gate, a worn wooden plank with hand-carved letters. Franklin squinted to read, "Amparo's Hope House, founded by Amparo Osborne." Franklin Vance's legs weakened. An invisible weight fell upon his chest. He suddenly ran out of air. He took a step back, seeking support against the wall of a nearby house. His left hand gripped the brick, his right hand rose, trembling, to his mouth. That name carved into the wood, that name he had buried almost an entire lifetime ago, along with the memories of a childhood no one ever knew had existed. Amparo Osborne, the woman who had saved him when he was just a very small child. The woman who had taken in his dying mother in a lost shelter amidst the mud. The woman whose name he had promised to honor, and whom he had never, in so many years of success and fortune, sought out again. "It can't be," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. His eyes filled with tears without warning. It can't be the same place. And as his gaze swept over the facade of that humble little house, Franklin Vance, the owner of Vance Logistics Group, the most feared man on the boards of directors in 3 countries, felt for the first time in decades a cold hand pass over the back of his neck, the hand of his past, and a truth he had carried, buried since he learned to walk, was about to hit him in the face with the force of everything he once refused to remember. Franklin Vance couldn't move from the brick wall where he had leaned. Tears fell uncontrollably, sliding down his cheeks to disappear into the collar of his shirt. He had never cried like that on a public street. He had never let anyone see him with slumped shoulders, or a trembling mouth, or broken breathing, like a man who had just recognized the face of a beloved ghost. On the other side of the path, within the patched wooden fence, he could hear children's laughter, women's voices giving gentle commands, the clatter of a heavy pot against a stove, the everyday sounds of a house that fed many and boasted of nothing. Franklin wiped his eyes, took a deep breath, tried to reassemble the pieces of his memory that had suddenly scattered like an ancient puzzle someone had just stepped on. Amparo Osborne, the name kept pounding in his temples. That woman with long braids, thick hands, an apron always splattered with flour. That woman who had taken in his sick and lost mother when the rest of the world had closed its doors to them. That woman who had sat him on her lap when he was just a tiny child and given him the first hot meal he remembered eating in his life. He slowly moved away from the wall where he stood. He took a few steps back. He didn't want to be seen by any of the women entering or leaving the gate. Not yet. Not now. So he returned to the car where Arthur Smith waited with a discreet expression. He sat in the back seat, closed the door softly. He remained silent for several minutes, looking at the vehicle's ceiling. "Shall we go, sir?" the driver asked carefully. "Not yet," Franklin replied, his voice broken. "First I need to know. I need to know if it really is her who founded this place. I need to know who that woman is who leaves the depot every afternoon with an empty box in her arms." Arthur nodded. He asked no questions. He had learned over the years not to inquire when his boss's eyes held that particular glint, the glint that money couldn't fix. Meanwhile, inside Amparo's Hope House, Mary had entered through the gate and placed the box on a long wooden table that occupied the center of an inner courtyard. On that table, other boxes were already piled, some open, others cut in half, others disassembled and spread out like cardboard sheets. "Aunt Mary, did you bring us more boxes today?" a little girl asked, tugging on her sleeve, her eyes bright. "Yes, my love, a big one, so Miss Rosalva can finish the baby crib for Clemencia Summer's baby." The girl clapped her hands and ran off to tell everyone. Mary smiled, a tired but genuine smile, and took off the backpack she carried on her shoulder. She hung it on a nail by the entrance. She walked to the kitchen, where several women were serving steaming bowls of soup to children sitting on long benches. "Mary's here," one of the women announced. "Come, my dear, try this soup. It's finger-licking good." "Rosalva, later. I want to ask something first." Miss Rosalva Evans, a robust woman with strong arms and a cheerful voice, wiped her hands on a cloth slung over her shoulder and turned to Mary with an attentive expression. She was in charge of everything related to simple carpentry, sewing, and crafts within the house. The cardboard cribs for newborns, the chests for storing donated clothes, the shelves for the few books they had. Rosalva built all of it with her own hands, with the cardboard. Mary brought her every afternoon. "What's wrong, child? You look scared." Mary lowered her voice, moved closer. "Today I almost couldn't bring the box. The new supervisor wanted to report me in front of everyone. He yelled that I was a thief. He made me open the box in front of my co-workers. It was horrible, Rosalva." Miss Evans let out a soft curse under her breath and placed both hands on Mary's shoulders. "Oh, my dear. And what happened?" "The HR manager showed up and put him in his place. But he won't stay quiet. I know him. Tomorrow he'll find a way to hurt me." "What if they fire me, Rosalva? What if they fire me?" She didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. If Mary lost that job, the house would lose its main support, because what no one outside those walls knew was that a good part of Mary's small salary went to buying rice, oil, powdered milk, and fruit for the children of the home. The little she had left barely covered the rent for the small room where she slept. "My dear, don't worry about that now," Rosalva told her with gentle firmness. "One thing at a time. Your mother, rest in peace, used to say that problems are solved like cooking beans one by one on a slow fire." Mary nodded, but her eyes filled with tears at the mention of Amparo. Several years had passed since her mother had left, and there were still moments when she reached out for her before remembering she was no longer there. From outside the gate, still hidden behind the rusty pole on the corner, Franklin had returned on foot. He hadn't been able to stay in the car. Something pushed him to get closer, even if from the shadows. He could barely hear fragments of voices. He saw silhouettes pass through the crack of the half-open gate, and every detail he caught clicked into place, confirming, hitting his chest with more force. That same structure, that same inner courtyard, that same crooked mango tree in the corner that still bore fruit after so many years. He had played under that tree. He had eaten fallen mangoes with dirty hands, sitting on a flat stone that was still there. His mother watched him from the kitchen door, sick but smiling, while Amparo prepared hot tea to soothe her cough. The memories now came in waves, images he had buried under years of meetings, signatures, contracts, private jet travel, images that no expensive therapist, no spiritual retreat in the mountains, no aged liquor had ever managed to tear from his chest. He took out his cell phone, dialed a number, and waited. "Patricia, it's me, Patricia Brooks," his personal assistant for over a decade, answered with an alert voice from the other end. "Mr. Vance, tell me. I need you to look for a file. In the company's old archives, from many years ago, a donation my mother made before she died. It was to a community house in an outlying neighborhood. It was called Amparo's Hope House. It was run by a woman named Amparo Osborne." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Sir, forgive me, but you never mentioned anything about that to me." "I never mentioned it to anyone," he replied, his throat tight. "But I need it now. Tonight I want all the documents, all the checks, all the letters, everything we have archived. And if there's nothing, I want you to tell me there's nothing. But search, Patricia. Please search." "Yes, sir. I'll get right on it." Franklin hung up, holding the phone pressed against his chest for several seconds, because now he remembered something else. Something that had been lost in the depths of his memory, protected by years of pride and preoccupations. Before she died, his mother had asked him for only one thing, A promise, a phrase spoken with her last breath as she clutched his fingers against white sheets borrowed from the charity hospital where Amparo worked in the kitchen, sheets that had been spread over the humble cot in the back room of Amparo's Hope House. My son, never forget Amparo. She saved us when no one else would look at us. Go back and find her someday. Give her back even a little of all she gave us. He had promised with tears in his eyes. And then, over the years, with success, with the urgency of building an empire, with the arrogance of one who believes the present erases the past, he had let that promise gather dust. He leaned against the pole, closed his eyes. "Forgive me, Mom," he whispered into the air, his lips trembling. Inside the house, Mary had already sat down in a corner of the kitchen with a bowl of soup in her hands. Little Hope Rivera, the most restless child in the home, had settled on her lap. Mary blew on the spoon before giving it to her. "Auntie, will you tell me the story of Grandma Amparo again? Which one do you want today, my love? The one where she rescued the skinny boy from the hospital." Mary smiled tenderly. It was one of the children's favorite stories in the home. A story her mother had repeated 1,000 times throughout her life, and which she, without knowing why, preserved in her memory with strange precision, as if that skinny boy had been someone important to everyone's destiny. A long time ago, Mary began in a storyteller's voice. Grandma Amparo worked in the kitchen of a charity hospital, a humble hospital for people who didn't have money for medicine. And one day, a very sick woman arrived, carrying her little boy by the hand. Hope's eyes widened. The woman could barely speak from so much coughing, and the boy, thin and quiet, gripped his mother's skirt tightly as if he were afraid the wind would carry him away. No one wanted to take them in anywhere. No shelters, no refuges, no churches. They said there was no room, that they had no budget, that they were already full. And what did Grandma Amparo do, Auntie? Grandma Amparo left the hospital with her apron still on, walked to where they were sitting on the bench outside, took their hands, and said, "Come with me to my house, for where two eat, four can eat, and where there is heart, there is shelter." Hope's eyes filled with tiny tears. She brought them right here, to this little house. The mother stayed until she rested in peace. And the boy? The boy grew up a little with us, and then some distant relative came to get him and took him away. And did he ever come back to visit, Auntie? Mary paused. She looked towards the gate, not knowing why. "No, my love, that boy never came back. My mom waited for him her whole life, but that boy never came back." Outside, hidden against the pole, Franklin Vance sank onto the dusty sidewalk. He covered his face with both hands because that skinny boy in the story was him, and he had just heard with his own ears what the world thought of his forgetting. Franklin Vance remained seated on the sidewalk for what felt like an eternity. The dust from the path had clung to his fine trousers, but he didn't care. For the first time in many years, nothing truly mattered, except the voice that continued to echo within his chest like a distant bell. That boy never came back. That boy never came back. He stood up with difficulty. His legs felt like cotton. He walked slowly back to the car, where Arthur Smith waited with the expression of one who knows not to ask anything. "Let's go, Arthur, for now." "To the office, sir?" "No, home. I need to think and I need to read the documents Patricia is looking for." The car slowly pulled away from the Pine Ridge community. Franklin looked out the window without seeing. The city lights began to turn on one by one, as if someone were lighting candles for a collective prayer. That night, locked in the study of his enormous house, Franklin received a dust-covered yellow folder from Patricia Brooks. His assistant had found it in a forgotten filing cabinet in the company's basement, inside a box labeled with faded letters. Personal donations. Teresa Mason Vance. His mother's name. Franklin moved a glass of water aside and spread the folder on the desk. His hands trembled. Inside were signed receipts, letters written in neat, rounded handwriting, black and white photographs, and a sheet of paper folded into four, yellowed with age. He opened it carefully. It was a letter from his mother addressed to Amparo Osborne. "Dearest Amparo, my soul sister, if you are reading this, it is because my time has come. The doctor gave me only a few weeks. Do not be afraid. I go in peace. Thanks to you. Please, always take care of that little house you opened with your own hands. And if my Franklin ever returns, remind him who his mother was. Remind him that he was born of love, not luxury, and that a man is worth what he does for others, not what he accumulates for himself. I leave you here all the little money I managed to gather selling my gold earrings, the only ones I had left. Use them for the children in the neighborhood, for their milk, for their school supplies. I will continue to watch over you from heaven. Your eternal sister, Teresa." Franklin closed his eyes. A tear fell onto the yellowed sheet. He hadn't only failed Amparo, he had failed his own mother. At the bottom of the letter was a list, written in Amparo Osborne's tiny handwriting, detailing everything that money had bought over the following years: diapers, medicines, a new boiler, elementary school books, a mango tree, planted in the courtyard a mango tree. Franklin let the paper fall onto the table and covered his mouth with both hands. Meanwhile, in the rented room where Mary lived, the night also felt heavy. She had taken off her shoes, washed her face with cold water, and sat in front of a small wooden table with 3 framed photos on it. One of her mother, Amparo, smiling with her apron on, another of Mary as a child, perched on an older woman's shoulders, and a third, the most worn of all, where her mother appeared alongside another thin, sick woman, hugging a small boy with big eyes. Mary caressed that third photo with her thumb. "Who are you now, little boy?" she whispered. "My mom always missed you. She always wondered if you were eating well, if someone was telling you stories before bed." She didn't know why, but that night she felt a strange impulse to tape that photo to the mirror, as if someone could see it and recognize it. She did, and went to sleep, unaware that a few miles away, the skinny boy from the photo was crying like an adult over a letter from his mother. At dawn the next day, Mary arrived at South Point Distribution Center following her usual routine. She greeted the guard, punched in, and headed to the aisle where she assembled orders for the morning shift. But something was different. Co-workers glanced at her. Some hid their cell phones when she passed. Others murmured softly among themselves. One even let out a brief, forced laugh as she walked by. Mary felt a knot in her stomach, but said nothing. A co-worker, Yolanda Carter, approached her with a scared look and spoke in a low voice. "Girl, you have to see this. Last night someone uploaded the video to social media." "What video?" "Yesterday's, when the supervisor stopped you at the gate and made you open the box in front of everyone. It already has thousands of views. They're saying horrible things about you in the comments. That you're a thief, that you should be made an example of." "Look," Yolanda showed her cell phone screen. There was the video, Mary standing by the metal bench with the open box, while Richard pointed and yelled. A large title, written by some mocker, read, "Shameless employee, caught taking things from the depot." Over 40,000 views in one night. Mary swallowed. The whole world seemed to shrink around her. She leaned on a shelf box to keep from falling. "I have no words, Yolanda." No one asked. No one wanted to know why I was taking that box. They just took it as entertainment. "Girl, don't be alone." Several co-workers are already saying inside that what happened was wrong, that Benson went too far, but he's strutting around like a peacock. "Be careful. He says he's going to get the signature to fire you today." On the upper floor, inside the glass-walled management office, Richard Benson slammed his fist on the table as he spoke with 2 assistant managers. His face was red, the veins in his neck bulging. "I will not allow that woman to make a fool of me. The video is everywhere. They're tagging me as the abusive supervisor. Me, when she was the one taking company property. She needs to be fired today. Today. Do you hear me? Before noon." One of the assistant managers, a prudent man named Carl Anderson, tried to calm things down. "Richard, calm down. Lucy Parker has to approve that. And above her, Mr. Vance himself. We can't bypass protocol. We have to wait." "Then let Mr. Vance come," Richard shouted. "Let him come down from his pedestal and see with his own eyes who he has working here." What Richard didn't know was that Mr. Vance had already seen with his own eyes, and he was about to walk through the door of that office in a matter of minutes. At Amparo's Hope House, the morning also began with activity. Rosalva Evans was finishing assembling the cardboard crib for the baby of Clemencia Summers, a young woman who had arrived at the shelter a few days earlier, without family and nowhere to go. The baby had been born the previous night in a public hospital and would return that same afternoon in his mother's arms. Rosalva had lined the cardboard with soft, donated fabrics. She had painted little stars on the sides with leftover acrylic paint. She had reinforced the base with another layer of thick cardboard, the kind Mary brought from the depot. The crib was beautiful, humble, but made with true love. "Clemencia's here with the baby," one of the women announced from the door. Miss Clemencia entered, the child wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were tired, but bright. When she saw the crib painted with little stars, she stopped dead. She put her hand to her mouth and burst into tears. "Rosalva, you made this for my child?" "Of course, my dear. This child is ours now. Welcome to this house. Come, lay the little angel down in here." Clemencia carefully placed the baby on the soft fabrics. The little one opened his eyes for an instant. He made a small sound with his lips and fell back asleep peacefully. All the women of the house applauded softly, Some cried, others smiled with transformed faces. It was one of those small moments that sustained the entire life of that place. A boy watched everything from a corner. His arms were crossed, his thin knees showing beneath patched pants, and his gaze was alert, too alert for his age. Matthew Carson, 12 years old, with big, dark eyes. He had grown up in the house since he was little, ever since his mother left him one rainy night and never returned. Amparo had taken him in as her own, and when Amparo passed away, it was Mary who silently took over the care of that child, asking nothing in return. Matthew didn't talk much, but he saw everything and remembered everything. Rosalva noticed him in the corner and smiled. "My son, what are you doing there so quiet?" "I was thinking." "Auntie." "About what, my love?" "About the man who was outside yesterday, the one in the suit." Rosalva slowly turned to him. "Which man, Matthew?" "The one who was crying by the pole. I saw him from the back window. He was listening to Aunt Mary's story and crying a lot, Auntie. Like someone cries when something very old hurts them." Rosalva felt a shiver. She didn't know why, but something stirred inside her. "And he saw you, my son?" "No, Auntie. I hid behind the curtain, but he looked like someone who knew this place, as if he had been here before." Rosalva remained silent. She looked at the boy with a mixture of tenderness and inquiry. "Matthew, don't tell anyone about this yet. Let me think about it slowly." "Okay, Auntie." That same morning, a few hours later, a dark car parked in front of the wooden fence of Amparo's Hope House. From the back seat stepped a tall man, dressed in much simpler clothes than the day before. A plain shirt, dark trousers, no tie. He had decided not to enter as a businessman. He had decided to enter as what he truly was, a son who had taken too long to return. Franklin stood in front of the gate for an instant, took a deep breath, and pushed the wood open. Inside, women moved back and forth, some washing, others cooking. Children played in the inner courtyard under the crooked mango tree that still bore fruit. Rosalva was the first to notice the stranger. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked towards him with a cautious expression. "Can I help you, sir?" Franklin opened his mouth. He wanted to speak. He couldn't. He looked around the courtyard, the tree, the flat stone, the kitchen in the background, the worn curtains. Everything was the same, exactly as he remembered it. He began, his voice broken. "I was here many years ago, when I was a very small child, with my mother." Rosalva slowly brought her hand to her chest. Matthew, watching from the kitchen door, opened his eyes wide. It was the same man who had been crying by the pole. "What is your name, sir?" Rosalva asked carefully. "Franklin. Franklin Vance. But my mother's name was Teresa. Teresa Mason. She died here in this house, in a small room in the back, with sheets Amparo had borrowed from the charity hospital where she worked in the kitchen." Rosalva dropped the rag she held. "My God," she whispered. At that very moment, from the kitchen doorway, a voice spoke behind Rosalva. "Teresa Mason?" Franklin raised his head, and there, standing under the wooden door frame, apron on and hands white with flour, was Mary Roberts. She was staring at him. She didn't recognize his face, but she recognized something deeper. She recognized the last name, recognized the story, recognized the photo she had taped to her mirror. Time stopped between them. The children stopped playing. The women stopped cooking. Rosalva stopped breathing for an instant. Mary took a step forward, her eyes filled with tears. You are the skinny little boy from the photo." Franklin felt his legs buckle. He leaned against the trunk of the mango tree and slowly nodded his head. "Yes," he said, his voice in pieces. "I am that boy, the one who never came back." Until today, Mary walked towards him slowly, her eyes filled with warm tears, and without another word, she embraced him. She embraced him like Amparo's daughter embracing a lost brother. She embraced him like the story of the courtyard finally finished. And as Franklin cried against the shoulder of that woman who just the day before had been humiliated in his own depot, Matthew Carson, from the kitchen door, wiped a tear with his sleeve and felt that something enormous had just changed forever, because in that dirt courtyard, beneath a mango tree planted with the gold earrings of a dying mother, the boy who had forgotten had finally returned home. But none of the three imagined that at that very instant, on the upper floor of South Point Distribution Center, Richard Benson was angrily signing the document for Mary Roberts Osborne's immediate dismissal, and that the next day, when she tried to return to work, the depot door would be closed to her. The hug beneath the mango tree lasted as long as it needed to, not a second less, not a second more. Mary finally gently pulled away, without fully letting go of Franklin's hands, and looked into his eyes with a tenderness he didn't remember ever receiving in his adult life. "Come, Mr. Franklin, sit down." I'll pour you some coffee, and we can talk slowly. There's a lot you need to know, and there's a lot my mother left waiting for you." The women of the house had remained paralyzed, watching the scene. Rosalva Evans brought her apron to her eyes. Clemencia Summers, still holding her sleeping baby in her arms, whispered a prayer, softly. The children, who had initially approached out of curiosity, had understood without understanding that this moment was sacred and had slowly retreated to the backyard. Only Matthew Carson had stayed close, sitting on the flat stone next to the mango tree trunk, pretending to assemble something with bits of wire, but his big ears were fully attentive to every word. Franklin let himself be guided to a long wooden bench against the kitchen wall. Mary disappeared inside. When she returned, she carried 2 steaming cups and a dented tin box, one of those old ones where important documents are kept. "My mother left this for me before she passed. She told me that inside were letters, photos, and memories of people she loved very much. She made me promise that if someone ever appeared at this door looking lost, I would open the box without asking questions." Franklin placed his hand on the lid. He didn't dare lift it yet. "Mary, you have no idea the weight you lifted from me by receiving me. I came here not knowing what to expect, not knowing if I would be met with a closed door, with reproaches, with silence. And you embraced me. Why?" Mary smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. "Because my mother taught me that those who return late are not judged by the time they took, but are welcomed for the courage they had to return." Franklin closed his eyes. That phrase pierced him like a sweet needle. He opened the box slowly. Inside were faded photographs, small yellowed envelopes, a short braid of hair wrapped in folded paper, and at the bottom, a worn cloth-bound notebook, handwritten from beginning to end in Amparo Osborne's rounded script. The notebook was a diary where Amparo had recorded over the years every name, every face, every story that had passed through Amparo's Hope House. Franklin leafed through it with trembling hands until he found a page marked with a red thread. "Today I received Teresa Mason and her son, little Franklin. The poor woman arrived with a very bad cough. The boy has the biggest eyes I've ever seen. He clung to my skirt the moment he came in. I gave him warm milk with a little brown sugar. He drank it all in one go. He asked me in that tiny voice, 'Ma'am, do you love us?' I told him yes and swore internally that I would never let this child go hungry as long as I lived." Franklin couldn't read any further. He closed the notebook and pressed it against his chest. He cried in silence, like men who spend their lives without allowing themselves to cry and suddenly find their dams broken. Mary said nothing. She simply placed a hand on his back and waited. While that reunion was happening beneath the mango tree at South Point Distribution Center, the morning progressed with a different tension. Richard Benson had already signed the dismissal document and personally delivered it to Lucy Parker's office. He had demanded that the dismissal be executed that same day. He had alleged loss of trust, public scandal, and damage to corporate image due to the viral video. Lucy had read the document with a furrowed brow. She knew something wasn't right. A dismissal for just cause required proof, and she herself had personally checked the empty box. There was no crime, no theft, absolutely nothing to support the decision. But Richard had the backing of 2 assistant managers he had recruited over time, and protocol, unfortunately, allowed for separation under certain administrative figures. Lucy picked up the phone, dialed Mr. Vance's office directly 3 times. No one answered. Patricia Brooks replied by text message that Mr. Vance was in an unavoidable private meeting and could not be interrupted for anything. Lucy pressed her lips together, ran her hand across her forehead, and signed the document with one hand, while with the other, she opened a separate second folder on her computer, in a private folder where she began to save copies of everything. The video, the witnesses, the violated protocol, the internal messages. Something told her that this story wasn't over yet, and that she would need every one of those papers later. When Mary returned to the depot that afternoon to finish a pending order, surprise hit her at the gate. The security guard, an older man named Barnaby Urban, looked at her sadly and spoke in a low voice. "My dear, I can't let you in. I have written instructions. They gave me the order this morning." "What order, Mr. Barnaby?" "You're fired, dear. Effective today. It says here due to public scandal and loss of trust. I'm so sorry, truly, but if I let you in, I'll be the one who loses my job." Mary stood in front of the gate for several seconds. She didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't argue. She simply nodded slowly, like someone who had already prepared for that blow since the night before. "I understand, Mr. Barnaby. Thank you for telling me respectfully. It's not your fault, dear. There's something else." Barnaby pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. He handed it to her discreetly, looking around. Yolanda left it for me this morning, very early, with instructions to give it to you only if they denied you entry. She said everything you'll need is inside. Mary took the envelope carefully, put it in her purse without opening it. Right there, she said goodbye to the guard with a faint smile, and started walking back on foot, too tired even to take the bus. She walked block after block down the avenue. The sun beat on her face. Cars passed by her. No one looked at her. No one knew who she was. She was just another woman walking with the weight of the world on her shoulders. When she reached a small square, she sat on an iron bench. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were 2 handwritten pages from Yolanda Carter. "Friend, when you read this, you won't be working with us anymore. I'm heartbroken, but I want you to know you're not alone. Several co-workers are organizing something behind the scenes. We have the original, unedited video. We have witnesses willing to talk about how Benson humiliated you for no reason. We have the internal report that clearly states the box was empty, and we also have something you don't know yet." Mary turned the page, her heart racing. Months ago, Benson fired another co-worker on the night shift, a young woman named Delia Maxwell. He fabricated a story about missing depot material and accused her in front of everyone, just like he did with you. Delia lost her job, lost the small place she lived in, almost lost custody of her son because she had no income. And then, when they checked inventories, they discovered the missing material was in a hidden warehouse. Benson himself had taken it out to sell on the side, but by the time that came out, he had already covered up the case with a bought signature. We have evidence of that other case too. And now, with your viral video, the window has finally opened to unmask him. Mary felt the air escape her chest suddenly. Richard Benson wasn't just an abusive supervisor. He was a thief who had been using humble women for years as a front for his own crimes. And she, without knowing it, had become the thread that could unravel the whole knot. Mary folded the letter, pressed it against her chest, and for the first time all afternoon, her eyes shed tears, but they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of rage, transforming into strength. That same night, at Amparo's Hope House, Franklin had meant to leave. He had stayed to help serve dinner to the children, even though he barely knew how to serve a plate. He had listened to stories by the mango tree. He had sat on the flat stone where he used to eat mangoes as a child, and he had cried in silence while the children played around him, not understanding why that elegant man had red eyes. Matthew Carson had slowly approached and sat beside him without speaking, simply sharing the space, as children do when they sense the adult beside them needs company more than words. "Mr. Franklin," Matthew said after a long silence, "when I'm your age, I want to have heart. I don't just want to have money, because money runs out, but the heart keeps working until the last day." Franklin slowly turned to the boy. "Who taught you that, Matthew?" "Aunt Mary, and before her, Grandma Amparo. She told me that a heart kept in an empty box is worth more than 1,000 boxes full of gold." Franklin felt a punch in his chest. Empty boxes, all this time, all these years, while he had been obsessed with filling boxes, with bills, with contracts, with figures. That humble woman had walked the street every afternoon carrying empty boxes that were, in reality, the fullest in the world, full of purpose, full of memory, full of love. At that very instant, Mary entered through the gate of the house. She looked tired, her shoes dirty, her purse slung over her shoulder, her eyes swollen, but with something new in her gaze. A spark, a decision. Franklin stood up as soon as he saw her. "Mary, what happened?" She approached, placed her purse on the bench, and took a deep breath. "They fired me today, Mr. Franklin. Benson got the signature to separate me from your company." Franklin clenched his jaw. Blood rushed to his temples. "What did you say?" "That they fired me without proof, without a hearing, without the right to defend myself. But I didn't come to complain to you. I didn't come to ask you to give me my job back." "Mary, no, sir, listen to me. I came to ask for something else." She pulled Yolanda Carter's letter from her bag. She extended it. Franklin received it with a trembling hand. He read it in silence, line by line. When he finished, his eyes held a different glint than that morning. They were no longer the eyes of the cold businessman, nor the eyes of the broken man. They were the eyes of the boy from the mango courtyard turned warrior. "This isn't just against me, Mary. This is against other Delias. This is against other Marys. This is against every humble woman who has passed through that man's hands in my own companies." "Exactly, Mr. Franklin. And if we're going to fight, I want us to fight not just for me, but for all those who weren't this lucky." Franklin nodded slowly, took his phone from his pocket, and dialed a number. "Patricia, I need you to arrange a meeting first thing tomorrow morning with Lucy Parker, our legal advisors, and a private investigator. And I also need the files of all female employees dismissed for public scandal in recent years. All of them, without exception. I don't want a single one to escape us." He hung up. He looked at Mary. "Tomorrow the other war begins, and this time we won't lose it." The corporate tower of Vance Logistics Group rose against the morning sky like a glass giant. Franklin entered through the main door with a stride that the reception employees had never seen from him. He didn't greet with his usual coldness, didn't ask for coffee, didn't stop in front of the executive hallway mirror to adjust his tie. He walked straight to the private elevator with Mary Roberts beside him, dressed in her usual simplicity, her purse slung across her chest, and her gaze held high. Employees discreetly turned to look. Some recognized Mary from the video, others simply perceived the different aura surrounding that humble woman walking beside the owner of the corporate group. In the meeting room on the 22nd floor, Lucy Parker, Patricia Brooks, two corporate lawyers named Ivan Williams and Valentina Phillips, and a man with a serene expression, a thick folder on his lap, were already waiting. This was the private investigator, Stephen Reed. Franklin entered and closed the door personally. He didn't sit at the head of the table. He dragged a common chair from the side of the table and placed it next to Mary's. Then he settled beside her. The gesture was small, but it said everything. Mary was not a guest in that meeting. She was the other main voice. "Thank you for coming at this hour," Franklin began in a firm voice. "I'll be direct with you. What we're going to discuss here does not leave this room until I authorize it. We are facing a problem that is much bigger than it seems, and we are going to tackle it from the root." Lucy Parker took a deep breath and opened her laptop. "Mr. Vance, before you continue, I need to tell you something. I knew Miss Roberts' dismissal was wrong. I tried to warn you, but I couldn't reach you in time. Even so, I signed the document under pressure from Benson and his assistant managers. I want you to know that throughout the process, I kept private copies of every piece of evidence that passed through my hands. I have backups of the unedited video. I have internal messages where Benson brags about having influence over operational management, and I have the violated protocols noted one by one." She opened a folder on her screen with over 40 files, ordered by date. Franklin looked at Lucy with a mixture of respect and gratitude. "Lucy, you just did more for this company in a single night than many executives do in their entire careers. Thank you." Then he turned to the investigator. "Stephen, tell us what you found." Stephen Reed placed the folder on the table. He opened it calmly. "Mr. Vance, I dedicated the entire night to investigating the pattern that Miss Yolanda Carter described in the letter you sent me, and the findings are conclusive. Richard Benson has carried out dismissals under similar accusations for years. All the victims have been women, all humble, all without legal resources to respond. And in at least 3 confirmed cases, the missing inventories he attributed to the workers later appeared sold in informal black market stalls, traceable to intermediaries directly hired by him. Mary clenched her fists on her knees. "I identified 7 suspicious dismissals," Stephen continued. "Of those 7, 6 women still live within the same urban perimeter. I located all of them, and one of them, the best known by other employees, is Delia Maxwell. She lives in a rented room behind a bakery. She lost temporary custody of her son for months due to a lack of verifiable income. Today she survives selling empanadas from a cart next to the bus stop." Franklin closed his eyes for an instant. When he opened them, his gaze burned. "Were you able to contact her?" "Yes, sir. She received me early this morning. At first, she distrusted me, but when I told her we were investigating Benson, she burst into tears. She told me she had been waiting for years for someone to believe her." Mary spoke for the first time since she had sat down. "I want to meet her today." Franklin nodded. "We'll go together." The bakery was on a narrow corner, where the smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the noise of the buses. Behind a small side gate, at the back of a tiny courtyard, was Delia Maxwell's room. It was a small, clean space, with a single bed, a stove, a religious image taped to the wall, and an open school notebook on a small table. Delia came out to greet them, an apron over her clothes. Her eyes were dull, but her dignity intact. As soon as she saw Mary, she covered her mouth with her hands, and her eyes filled with tears. "You're the one from the video," she whispered. "The one who didn't break. The one who spoke up." Mary hugged her without thinking. 2 women humiliated by the same man, recognizing each other without having met before. Franklin stayed a few steps back, giving them space, but he felt tears well up in his own eyes. They sat inside the small room. Delia told them everything. How Benson had fabricated a theft of tools, how he had humiliated her in front of her co-workers on the night shift, how she had lost her income, then the room where she lived, then her child, who had had to go live with an aunt for a while she tried to rebuild something, how she had wanted to report it, but the lawyers she consulted told her that without concrete evidence, there was no case, how she had learned to make empanadas from her mother's memory, because it was the only thing she didn't need a boss for to survive. But the hardest part wasn't losing my job, Miss Mary. The hardest part was seeing my son's eyes when I had to leave him with my sister. He was only 7 years old. He asked me if I was going to stop being his mom, and I had to lie to him, swearing that we would meet again soon, when deep down I didn't know if it would be true. Mary took both her hands. Delia, it's okay. You're not alone anymore. What they did to you, they're going to pay for, and we're going to get your son back with you. I swear that on my mother's soul. Franklin stepped forward, knelt beside Delia's bed to be at her eye level. Miss Delia, I am the owner of Vance Logistics Group. I am the man you silently cursed all these years for not protecting your own employees. And you were right. I didn't look down. I looked at the balances, at the reports, at the figures, and while I signed papers in my office, men like Benson destroyed lives like yours, using my company as a shield. Delia looked at him with wide eyes. Sir, listen to me. Today I am here to personally ask for your forgiveness and to tell you that everything that was taken from you will be restituted. Your salary for all these years, moral damages, the room you lost, and you will have a dignified job in my company the day you want to return, but only the day you want to, because no one else in my name will force you to do anything. Delia brought both hands to her face and cried for a long time. Mary handed her a tissue. Before leaving, Franklin gave her a card with a direct number. Call me whenever you want, at night, in the early morning, whenever. This number is yours now too. When they left the room, Franklin paused for an instant at the corner of the bakery, placed his hand against the wall, and took a deep breath. Mary approached. Are you all right, Mr. Franklin? No, Mary, I'm not all right. But for the first time in a very long time, I don't want to be all right yet either. I think I needed to feel this. I think my soul was numb from so much comfort. They walked together towards the car where Arthur Smith waited in silence. That same afternoon, Franklin convened an extraordinary board meeting. He asked no one for permission, simply announced that the meeting was mandatory and everyone had to be present. Richard Benson, summoned along with the other operations managers, entered the room with his chest puffed out, unsuspecting of what awaited him. When he saw Mary sitting next to Vance, his face instantly fell. What is that woman doing here? He asked, raising his voice. This is a management meeting. Sit down, Benson, Franklin replied, without looking up from his papers. And keep your voice down. Today, I'm the one who will speak. Richard sat down, confused, still trying to impose his presence with a gesture. Franklin opened a folder. On the table, he spread out photographs, cross-referenced inventories, signed documents, and records of movements in secondary warehouses. Mr. Benson, for years you have been using this company as a private tool for personal enrichment. For years you have fabricated false accusations against humble women to divert attention from the thefts you yourself carried out with intermediaries. For years you have used my name, my signature, and my company as a shield for your own illegal activities. Richard stood up. That's a lie. I have years of impeccable service. You have no proof of anything. Proof? Franklin also stood up. He pointed to the folders on the table. Here's proof. Here are names. Here are approximate dates. Here are witnesses willing to testify. Here is the signed declaration of Miss Delia Maxwell, a woman you ruined, and whose dignity and livelihood I am restoring today. Richard turned pale. You, and furthermore, Mr. Benson, here is the declaration of 5 more women, all dismissed by you under false accusations, all willing to testify, all accompanied by a legal team that my company will pay for out of its own pocket to deliver justice. The other managers in the room watched the scene in absolute silence. Some lowered their gaze, others looked at Richard with expressions ranging from surprise to condemnation. No one dared to defend him. Franklin turned to the corporate lawyers. Ivan, Valentina, proceed with the formal notification. Mr. Benson is immediately separated from the company, with proven just cause. All pending payments are withheld while corresponding administrative processes are resolved, and immediately make all compiled documents available to the district attorney's office. You can't do this to me, Richard cried, his voice broken. I have a family. I have responsibilities. Mary, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, looked at him then for the first time. I also have a family, Mr. Benson. I had co-workers in this depot who were my family. I had children in a humble house who are my family, and you are going to sink us all with the same ease with which you signed my dismissal yesterday. So don't use that word with us. You don't know what it means." The silence that followed was crushing. Richard was escorted out of the room by 2 company security agents. Before leaving, he turned one last time to Mary with a look of hatred. But she didn't return his gaze. She no longer had time for him. She was looking ahead. That night, returning to Amparo's Hope House, Mary found Matthew Carson waiting for her, sitting on the flat stone in the courtyard, looking at the moon between the branches of the mango tree. "Auntie, you won." Mary sat beside him, put her arm around his shoulders. "Yes, my love, today. But this story isn't over yet. There are more children to help, more houses to open, more voices to raise." Matthew rested his head on Mary's shoulder, and among the leaves of the tree, the first stars of the night shone like silent witnesses to something much bigger that was just beginning. In the weeks following Richard Benson's separation, the entire company seemed to breathe differently. The depot aisles changed in tone. Co-workers who once looked at the floor began to greet each other with open smiles. Yolanda Carter was promoted to supervisor of the morning shift. The security guard Barnaby Urban received public recognition for his integrity, and the documents compiled by investigator Stephen Reed were already in the hands of the district attorney's office, proceeding with a weight that no bought lawyer could stop. Valentina Phillips, the corporate lawyer, coordinated with Ivan Williams the financial restitution to each of the 7 identified women, not only Delia Maxwell, but also Sonia Adams, Mercedes Turner, Adeline Quinn, Bertha Palmer, Rose Valdez, and Eugenia Morgan. All visited, all heard, all recognized as victims of a pattern that had been ignored for too long. Franklin Vance had changed. He was not the same man who rushed into his office. Now he arrived early, passed through the depot to greet workers by name, and ended his days at Amparo's Hope House, helping to serve dinner or sitting on the flat stone by the mango tree to listen to Matthew Carson's stories. But there was something he still hadn't confronted, something he had kept inside his chest like a small but heavy stone, something Mary Roberts had noticed without saying anything. His son, Sebastian Vance, a tall, quiet teenager who lived in the same huge house as Franklin, but who had gone years without exchanging more than 3 words a day with him. Since Sebastian's mother had passed away, father and son had become 2 inhabitants of the same silent castle. One afternoon, Mary dared to bring up the subject. "Mr. Franklin, it's not my business, but you are rebuilding the lives of many people, and that of your own son." Franklin lowered his gaze to the coffee cup he held in his hands. "Mary, with Sebastian, I no longer know where to start. He looks at me as if I were a stranger, and he's right. For years, I was a stranger, then stopped being one." Franklin looked at her. Mary smiled with that firm tenderness of hers. "Bring him to the house. Don't explain anything beforehand. Let him see with his own eyes." That same night, Franklin waited for Sebastian in the large living room of the house. The boy came down the stairs with headphones on, his brow furrowed, and the attitude of someone who had already decided that this conversation, too, would be empty. "Sebastian, tomorrow I want to take you somewhere. Dad, I have plans. I'm only asking for one afternoon. After that, if you want, you don't have to speak to me again for the rest of your life. But give me that afternoon." The boy took off one headphone, looking at him distrustfully. "What place?" "A place where, long ago, someone saved your grandmother Teresa's life and mine. A place that I betrayed for years with my forgetting, and that today is teaching me everything I should have taught you." Sebastian remained silent. Something in his father's tone was new. Without realizing it, he nodded. When the car stopped in front of the wooden fence of Amparo's Hope House, Sebastian looked out the window with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. Never in his life had he been in a neighborhood like this, or on a dirt road, or in front of a humble house with a patched metal roof. Franklin got out first. Sebastian slowly followed him. Inside, children played in the backyard. Rosalva Evans washed dishes by the stove. Clemencia Summers breastfed her baby, sitting in a plastic chair. Hope Rivera chased a distracted chicken. And at the long table in the inner courtyard, Mary was folding cardboard with Matthew. Matthew was the first to see Sebastian. He stood still, watching him. Sebastian didn't know what to do. He shoved his hands into his pockets, took a step aside as if trying to leave unnoticed. But Matthew got up from his chair, walked towards him without fear, and extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Matthew. You're Mr. Franklin's son." Sebastian hesitated. No one had ever spoken to him so naturally. At his private school, everyone calculated every phrase before speaking to him. He awkwardly shook the boy's hand. "Yes, I'm Sebastian. Come, I'll show you the mango tree your grandmother, Teresa, helped plant. Sebastian turned to his father, confused. Franklin nodded, his eyes moist. The boy followed Matthew to the center of the courtyard. For the next hour, Matthew told Sebastian the whole story with the clear voice of someone too young to lie. He spoke of Amparo Osborne, of Teresa's illness, of how that tree had grown with a mother's gold earrings, who had given everything, of how that skinny little boy from the story was now his dad. Sebastian listened. He never interrupted. He never looked bored or pulled out his cell phone. In the end, he simply sat on the flat stone, looked at the tree, and wiped his eyes. Franklin slowly approached, sat next to his son. Dad, why did you never tell me any of this? Because I buried it myself, son. Because I thought it was best to forget. And while I forgot who I had been, I also forgot to be your father. I ask for your forgiveness, Sebastian, for all the years I wasn't there, for all the silences, for all the times I chose a meeting over dinner with you. Sebastian didn't answer immediately. He lowered his head, his shoulders trembled, and suddenly that hard-shelled teenager, that boy who had spent years pretending nothing mattered to him, leaned into his father and hugged him. He hugged him for a long time. He hugged him like he hadn't since he was very little. Mary watched them from the kitchen door. She brought her hands to her chest. Tears streamed down her face without warning. That same night, back at the house, Franklin invited his son to the study. He showed him the tin box Mary had given him. He showed him Teresa's letter. He showed him Amparo's diary. And there, among the diary pages, they found a loose sheet that Franklin hadn't yet reviewed. It was a brief note written by Amparo years after Teresa's death. Today, the uncle who took little Franklin came to visit me, an old man of few words, with sad eyes. He told me he wasn't able to raise the child as he deserved, but that the legal papers forced him to comply. He begged me to forgive him if the child ever grew up without love. He promised me at least that he would never lack food or schooling. I prayed for him, and I prayed for little Franklin. Because sometimes those who fulfill an obligation without affection do more silent harm than those who abandon outright. Franklin read the note twice. Sebastian watched him from across the desk. Dad, that uncle was the one who raised you? Yes. And I could never explain why I always felt that he was fulfilling a duty, not an affection. Today I understand. He did what he could, but the coldness I learned to live with came from there. And without realizing it, I was passing that same coldness on to you. Sebastian approached, placed a hand on his father's. You won't do that anymore, Dad. You won't do that anymore. The next day, at Amparo's Hope House, Delia Maxwell arrived, walking hand in hand with a small child. The child looked at everything with wide eyes, amazed by the mango tree, by the other children running, by the smell of stew wafting from the kitchen. Mary, I'd like you to meet my son. I got him back today. The judge affirmed it this morning. Mary knelt in front of the child. She caressed his cheek with tenderness. Hello, my love. Welcome to the house. The child smiled shyly and moved closer to Delia, hiding behind her skirt. Matthew approached with a cardboard cutout in the shape of an airplane and handed it to him as a gift. Come, I'll teach you how to fly this. The two children ran off towards the back of the courtyard. Delia and Mary stood next to each other, watching them go. Neither said anything. There was no need. Outside, in front of the gate, a dark car parked. 3 people got out with cameras and notebooks. A reporter approached the fence respectfully. Is this Amparo's Hope House? We're from Local 5 News. We were told there's a story here that the entire country should know. Mary looked at Rosalva. Rosalva looked at Mary, and for the first time in decades, the house was about to emerge from anonymity. The Local 5 News team entered Amparo's Hope House with the respect of those stepping onto sacred ground. The reporter's name was Antonia Fisher. She was a serious woman with a soft voice who had called Mary to get permission before bringing a single camera into the courtyard. Mary had accepted on one condition, that she not be made the protagonist of the report, that they talk about Amparo, about the women of the house, about the children, about the mango tree. The interview lasted all morning. Antonia listened with shining eyes. Rosalva Evans showed the cardboard cribs she had assembled over the years. Clemencia Summers told how she had arrived lost with her baby and had been welcomed without questions. Hope Rivera recited a poem she had learned with Aunt Mary. Matthew Carson, sitting on the flat stone, recounted with his clear voice the story of the skinny little boy from the tale, without naming Franklin, because Mary had asked him to respect that secret, still his own. Franklin Vance watched from a corner of the courtyard with Sebastian. He had decided not to appear on camera. It wasn't his moment. It was theirs. When the report aired, The entire country paused. Social media filled with comments. Thousands of people cried in front of their screens. The video that months earlier had humiliated Mary at South Point Distribution Center was replaced on platforms by a new video. The one where Rosalva showed a cardboard crib with painted stars. The one where Hope recited her poem with clasped hands. The one where Matthew, looking directly at the camera with the dignity of children who have lived too much, said, "My Aunt Mary taught me that good people don't need to be seen. It's enough for them to know they're doing the right thing." That phrase traveled across the continent in a matter of days. The public response was a tsunami. Donations arrived from unexpected places. Humble families sending small amounts in envelopes with handwritten letters. Medium-sized businesses offered services. Universities invited Mary as a guest speaker. Schools asked to visit the house with their students. And anonymous mothers sent messages confessing that that story had restored their faith in something they thought was lost. Franklin did not remain in the background, but neither did he stay on the sidelines. He convened his own press conference, a single, short one, at the door of his corporate tower. He spoke standing, without a podium, without advisors behind him, with Sebastian by his side. "My name is Franklin Vance. For years, I built an empire ignoring the people who supported every brick of my buildings. Today, I publicly declare two things. First, that Vance Logistics Group will permanently allocate part of its income to the Amparo Osborne Foundation, officially created today, dedicated to protecting and supporting humble women, victims of arbitrary dismissals and silent labor abuses. Second, that this foundation will not bear my name. It will bear the name of the woman who saved me when I was just a very small child, because empires are built with figures, but legacies are built with gratitude." The speech lasted less than 2 minutes, but it was shared millions of times. Days passed. The house was restored with the help of donors, but respecting every original detail. The mango tree remained intact. The flat stone stayed in its place. The worn curtains were replaced by new ones, but Rosalva kept the old ones in a trunk as a relic. The wooden fence was reinforced. 2 more rooms were added in the back, a small library with books donated by schools across the country, and a new plaque next to Amparo's old plaque, which read, "All are welcome here. Where there is heart, there is shelter." Richard Benson was formally condemned by the judicial system. The assets accumulated from his thefts were handed over as part of the restitution to the victims. He never appeared in any public document again. His story ended as all stories end for those who believed they could humiliate the humble without consequences. In the silence of oblivion, Delia Maxwell accepted the job Franklin offered her, but not as an operative, but as the coordinator of the new employee support program, dedicated to overseeing internal company protocols and preventing any form of abuse. Her son, permanently reinstated, was enrolled in the same public school where Matthew was. Lucy Parker was promoted to General Director of Human Resources for the group. Patricia Brooks retained her position as personal assistant, but Franklin officially recognized her years of loyalty with a package that finally allowed her to build the home she had never been able to. Yolanda Carter, from her new position as supervisor, founded a small internal committee of female employees to review silent complaints. Barnaby Urban remained the gate guard, but now he entered and exited with his head held high. Investigator Stephen Reed was permanently hired by the company to audit other depots in different regions, and the other 6 women rescued by the investigation continued their paths, with full restitution. Sebastian Vance returned to the house every weekend without anyone asking him to. He had started helping with the children's homework. He had discovered almost by chance that he was good at explaining math. Matthew had adopted him as a silent older brother. One afternoon, walking together through the courtyard, Sebastian stopped in front of the mango tree. "Dad, I want to study something that will be useful for places like this. I don't want to manage companies. I want to make laws that protect people no one protects." Franklin didn't answer immediately. He put his arm around his shoulders, hugged him tight against his chest, and smiled, his eyes filled with tears. "Your grandmother Teresa would have been proud of you, son, and so am I." One quiet morning, Mary went up to the small room where she lived. She approached the mirror and, for the first time in a long time, peeled off the old photo she had kept there for months, the one where her mother hugged a sick woman and a little boy with big eyes. She took the photo of the skinny boy with her to the house. She handed it to Franklin without saying a word. Franklin took it with trembling hands, recognized his mother, recognized Amparo, recognized himself, small, pressed against the skirt of the woman who had given him the first hot meal of his life. "Mary, where was this photo?" "Taped to my mirror. Every night before going to bed, I would look at the little boy and wish him good night, without knowing who he was, without knowing that one day he would walk through this door, grown into a man. Franklin couldn't speak. He held the photo against his heart. On the last day of that year, Amparo's Hope House organized an open dinner for the entire neighborhood. Long tables set up with cardboard covered with fabrics, large pots of steaming soup, freshly baked bread, hundreds of small candles spread across the courtyard. Neighbors came. Families of the children from the shelter came. The rescued women came. Old and new depot workers came. Antonia Fisher came with her team, but this time without cameras, just to eat. Sebastian came with a friend from school who had insisted on seeing the place. Lucy, Patricia, Yolanda, Barnaby, Stephen, Evan, Valentina, Delia, with her son in hand, Clemencia Summers with her baby sleeping on her shoulder, Hope running between the guests' legs, all were there. In the center of the courtyard, beneath the mango tree, Franklin and Mary sat side by side on the flat stone. Matthew settled between them as always. Rosalva called for silence, with a soft tap of a spoon against a pot. Everyone fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. "Mary, my dear, say a few words. The place is asking for them." Mary didn't want to, but Matthew gently nudged her with his shoulder. She stood up, looked around, took a deep breath, and spoke in the most serene voice in the world. "For a long time, I walked through this city carrying empty boxes. People laughed, people pointed at me, people swore I was a thief, that I was crazy, that I was worthless. But those boxes were never empty. Those boxes carried my mother's memory. They carried the dreams of these children. They carried the hunger of women who had nowhere to go. They carried the silence of all the women who were once humiliated by someone stronger and had no voice to defend themselves." She paused, her eyes shining. "Today I want to tell you something my mother taught me, that valuable people are not measured by what they carry in their arms, but by what they carry in their hearts. That an empty box in the right hands can build cribs for babies, tables for children, roofs for homeless mothers, and that a box full of gold in the wrong hands cannot even buy a minute of peace." The eyes of everyone present were moist. Even the children, though they didn't understand everything, felt that something big was being said. "Thank you, Mr. Franklin, for returning. Thank you, Sebastian, for listening. Thank you to each of you, women, for rising after every humiliation. Thank you, Mom, wherever you are, for teaching me that true love never stays in a box. It is always shared." She fell silent, lowered her gaze, and then, in a final whisper, "Blessed be this little house. Blessed be this legacy of empty boxes. Blessed be the people who do not give up." The courtyard erupted in applause, in tears, in intertwined hugs. Matthew stood on the flat stone and hugged Mary around the waist. Franklin hugged Sebastian. The women hugged each other. The children ran among everyone, distributing laughter like gifts. Above, among the leaves of the mango tree, the breeze gently moved the branches, as if someone from somewhere had finally closed a book after many years of patient waiting. And in that dirt courtyard, under a tree planted with a dying mother's gold earrings, built with the rough hands of a humble woman who carried empty boxes every afternoon, the world found what it had forgotten to seek: that dignity is weightless, that goodness never runs out, and that true hearts, though the world may not see them pass, always carry something sacred in their arms.